The notification pinged at precisely 3:15 a.m., a sterile chime cutting through the drone of the engines. Below us, the lights of Frankfurt flickered once and were swallowed by a blanket of thick cloud. The subject line was brutally simple: employment status update. I remember blinking, my mind sluggish from exhaustion, assuming it was some automated HR memo. But the body of the message was stark and absolute. My name, my title, and a sentence that felt like a physical blow. Your services with OmniCore Solutions are no longer required. Effective immediately. All system access has been terminated. There was no phone call, no pretense of a meeting, not even a hollow thank you for a decade of service. Just this cold digital execution delivered at 39.0 feet. The sender was Harrison Thorne, the CEO himself, the man who, just a week ago, had clapped me on the shoulder and declared, "Andrew, you're the only man I'd trust with a deal this size." I glanced around the hushed first-class cabin. My fellow passengers were cocooned in their pods, lost in sleep, oblivious. A profound silence descended, broken only by the hum of the aircraft. I was utterly alone with this betrayal. 15 days, 4 continents, 5 clients. I had just spent 2 weeks living out of a suitcase, navigating boardrooms in Tokyo, Sao Paulo, London, and Frankfurt, wrestling 5 global titans into a landmark $3 billion technology deal. I hadn't just secured the contracts, I had conceived the entire strategy, built the relationships, and pulled the whole damn thing from the brink of collapse more than once. And now, I was unemployed. A chilling numbness seeped into my bones, a feeling that wasn't rage, not yet, but a profound, disorienting disbelief. It felt as if the floor of the jet had just vanished beneath my feet. I stared at the blank screen of my company laptop for a full minute. Then, a slow smile crept across my face. I reached into my carry-on and pulled out a second device, a sleek, unbranded laptop with military-grade encryption, the one OmniCore knew nothing about. As the login screen glowed to life, I knew. They thought they had just ended my career. They had no idea they'd just launched it. Just a month before, I was on the 42nd floor of the OmniCore tower, an unwilling witness to a corporate meltdown. A $600 million contract with a notoriously difficult German automotive giant, Vogel, had just imploded. Their CEO had stormed out of the final negotiation, leaving our executive team in a state of panic. Legal was scrambling, finance was busy assigning blame, and the vice president of sales looked like he was about to have a stroke. I hadn't been invited to the meeting. I was considered too aggressive for the final handshake. But I didn't wait for an invitation. I strode into the boardroom, picked up the shredded proposal from the table, and in 30 minutes, I had restructured the entire financial model. I placed a single, private call to Vogel's chief engineer, speaking his language and not German, but the language of technical integrity. By dawn, the deal wasn't just saved. It was expanded by another 100 million. This wasn't my first rescue mission for OmniCore. It was simply the latest. That evening, Harrison Thorne hosted a champagne toast in the executive lounge. He flashed one of his predatory, insincere smiles and said, "For all to hear, that's the kind of decisive action we need in our leadership." Rumors of my promotion to executive vice president of global strategy began to circulate. The title felt both absurd and long overdue. For 10 years, I was the company's closer, their fixer, the one they deployed when the smooth-talking executives in their $1,000 suits failed to deliver. I negotiated with oil barons, telecom moguls, and foreign governments. I spoke 4 languages, lived out of airports, and single-handedly propped up the illusion that OmniCore was far more competent than it actually was. But the promotion never materialized. It was perpetually under review or pending restructuring. The silence became deafening. Then I found out why. I was preparing a portfolio in a conference room adjacent to the boardroom where Harrison was having lunch with his cronies. The door was ajar. "Andrew's a killer, no doubt," one board member remarked with a chuckle, "but he's not one of us. He walks into a room and expects the best idea to win, not the guy with the right last name." Another voice, slick with condescension, added, "Exactly. He's a field operative, a brilliant tool. You don't make your hammer a partner in the firm. A tool. That's what I was to them, a disposable asset to be deployed and then stored away." The truth hit me with the force of a physical impact. They weren't grooming me for leadership. They were terrified of it. My competence was a threat to their comfortable, clubby hierarchy of inherited power and mediocrity. I stood there, clutching a portfolio of deals that had made them all rich, and a cold certainty settled in. I didn't quit. I didn't confront them. I went back to my desk and began laying the groundwork for the biggest deal in the company's history. If they wouldn't give me a seat at their table, I would build my own. Betrayal is rarely a sudden explosion. More often, it's a slow, toxic leak you don't notice until you're wading through the filth. A year ago, the source of that leak was Leo Thorne, Harrison's son. Fresh out of business school, Leo was given the title of Strategic Projects Coordinator, a meaningless position created to give him a corner office. His only qualification was his last name. His incompetence was legendary, but it reached a crisis point during a crucial demo with a new client. He had ignored every protocol I'd written, attempting an unauthorized system override to show initiative. He crashed the entire regional server, resulting in a 12-hour data outage for one of our most sensitive financial clients. It should have been a catastrophic, stock-plummeting scandal. Harrison called me, his voice stripped of its usual bravado. "Fix this, Andrew. Make it go away." He's young, he was trying to impress. I didn't argue. I spent the next 72 hours without sleep, working with my contacts, spinning the narrative, and recoding the damaged data logs myself. I framed it as an external stress test, a story that barely held up. I personally took the angry calls from the client's CTO, absorbing his fury so the Thorne name was never mentioned. My reward was silence. I told myself it was for the good of the company. But loyalty is a two-way street, and mine was heading toward a dead end. 3 days before I left for my 5-country trip to close the historic $3 billion Trident deal, I opened the shared project drive. I needed to make a final adjustment to the presentation deck, the culmination of a year of my work. My charts, my strategies, my proprietary analytics were all there, perfectly laid out. But when I checked the document's properties, the author was listed as Leo Thorne. I scrolled through the slides. He had made a few trivial changes, altering a font, rewording a bullet point, but the core architecture, the strategy, the very soul of the work was mine. He had plagiarized my masterpiece and signed his name to it. That evening I sat in my apartment, the city lights a blur outside my window, staring at the screen. A part of me wanted to storm into Harrison's office, to expose the fraud. But I knew exactly how it would play out. They would call it a collaborative effort. They would dismiss my claims as territorial. They would call me difficult, not a team player. So I did nothing. I packed my suitcase, confirmed my flights, and pushed the bitterness down. The pain wasn't a sharp stab. It was a slow-acting poison, seeping into my system every time I heard someone praise Leo's emerging strategic vision. I had saved his career, and in return, he was methodically erasing mine. Panic is a luxury I can't afford. When deals crumble or executives have meltdowns, I become calmer, more focused. So, when I realized the promotion was a lie and saw my work stolen by the CEO's son, I didn't erupt. I pivoted. I had started building my escape plan a year earlier, not because I expected this level of betrayal, but because I've always known that in the world of corporate power, loyalty is a currency for the naive. Leverage is the only thing that matters. OmniCore wasn't always a swamp of nepotism and political games. When I first joined, it was a dynamic challenger, filled with brilliant engineers and hungry strategists. But as Harrison Thorne consolidated his power, he systematically replaced innovators with loyalists. The culture shifted from meritocracy to mediocrity. The best minds, the people who built the company alongside me, were gradually pushed out. They were my friends, my mentors, and they were all waiting for the right signal. I called my shadow company Apex Solutions. It existed only as a legal entity, an encrypted server, and a network of trust. My team consisted of the best people OmniCore had let go. Ethan, our former head of legal, a man who could navigate international contract law in his sleep. Marcus, the architect of our core technology, who'd been sidelined for being too disruptive. We didn't build a product. We built a turnkey replacement for OmniCore itself, designed to be more agile, more transparent, and entirely client-focused. It was a lifeboat, waiting for the right moment to launch. That moment of clarity arrived during a long dinner in Sao Paulo with Ricardo Vargas, the CEO of Solara, one of the 5 key clients in the Trident deal. We had just finalized the last details of the contract. He leaned back, swirling the amber liquid in his glass. "Andrew," he said, his voice low and serious, "you don't carry yourself like an employee. You operate like a founder. So why are you not running the company you so clearly represent?" I offered a wry smile. "Because someone else's son inherited the title." Ricardo didn't laugh. "A title is just a word on a business card. Leadership is an action. If you ever decide to align your title with your actions, you call me first. Men like me, we invest in leaders, not in logos." His words resonated deeply because they confirmed what I already knew. The clients saw the rot. They saw the chasm between the person doing the work and the people taking the credit. They noticed the political promotions and the decline in innovation. On my return to New York, I didn't mention Ricardo's offer, but I did accelerate Apex's readiness. I held clandestine meetings with my core team in apartments, over encrypted channels, far from OmniCore's surveillance. Every component was locked into place. Harrison Thorne thought I was closing his biggest deal. In reality, I was preparing to execute my own. To an outsider, the ballroom at the Pierre Hotel looked like a coronation. Crystal chandeliers, a string quartet, and endless flutes of champagne. OmniCore was celebrating Leo Thorne's promotion to Vice President of International Strategy. The irony was a bitter pill to swallow. I had built that entire division from nothing, operating out of hotel rooms across 3 continents when international strategy was just a pipe dream on a whiteboard. I had paved that road with my own grit and exhaustion. Now, I was forced to stand in the back, nursing a glass of champagne, and applaud the princeling who had stolen my work, my team, and my title. Leo, looking smug in a tailored suit that didn't quite fit his soft frame, moved through the crowd, dropping buzzwords he'd learned from my presentations. "It is a distinct honor," he announced from the stage, "to accept this role and to drive forward the visionary strategy our company has established." He spoke as if the vision was his own. My name was never mentioned. Not one of the deals I'd closed, not one of the frameworks I'd designed. Ethan, my former legal counsel and now a core member of the Apex team, sidled up to me. "This is beyond insulting," he muttered. Insulting was an understatement. Colleagues I had bled with for years now struggled to meet my gaze. Harrison Thorne eventually took the microphone, his voice dripping with false sincerity. "We have watched Leo mature into a formidable leader," he boomed, "and there is no one better equipped to steer our most critical initiative, the Global Trident Partnership." The room erupted in applause. My stomach churned. Then came the final, brutal twist of the knife. Harrison gestured vaguely in my direction, and, as part of his transition, Leo will be shadowing Andrew on his upcoming trip to finalize the deal. Shadowing me, as if I were his mentor, as if I would willingly train the man who had usurped me. I wanted to smash the glass in my hand, to call out the lie in front of everyone. Instead, I smiled, a sharp, polished, predatory smile. Inside, a cold fire of humiliation burned, not because they were replacing me, but because they expected me to be a willing participant in my own erasure, to be the good soldier who quietly fades away. Leo approached me afterward, oozing fake camaraderie. "Andrew, old man, I hope you'll have time to walk me through the finer points of the Frankfurt negotiations. I'm still getting up to speed." I met his gaze, my smile unwavering. "You should get up to speed," I said calmly. "The Germans ask very pointed questions." He laughed, a nervous, high-pitched sound. "Well, if I get stuck, I'll just point them to you. You always have the answers." "I do," I said, the drawbridge of my patience finally lifting. They had no idea. I had already booked a parallel itinerary, a ghost flight that would take me through a different connection. Leo wouldn't be shadowing me. He wouldn't even be on the same continent. By the time I landed in Tokyo, I was running on pure adrenaline. The sham gala, the fake smiles, Leo's nauseating condescension had all hardened into a diamond-sharp resolve. Across the table from me was Mr. Kenjiro, the formidable head of a Japanese electronics giant. "Your company promises seamless integration," he stated flatly. "Your competitors make the same promise. Your words are meaningless to me. Show me the architecture." Before he could finish, I had my personal laptop connected to the projector, displaying a custom-built encryption protocol I had designed myself, a protocol so advanced, OmniCore's own engineers hadn't fully grasped it. I walked him through every line of code, every failsafe. When I was done, he gave a single, curt nod. "I now understand why they send the builder and not the salesman." As we walked out, I asked him quietly, And what if you could have the engine without the weight of the car attached? He paused. You mean without OmniCore? He didn't answer directly, but as his car pulled away, he looked back. Send me the private specifications again, to my personal address. London was next. Sterling Financial's legal team was paranoid about post-Brexit compliance. OmniCore's standard contract was a minefield of liabilities I had warned them about for months. They had ignored me. So, in my hotel room the night before the meeting, I rewrote the entire 80-page agreement using templates Ethan and I had developed for Apex. The next morning, I slid the new draft across the polished boardroom table. The general counsel, a shrewd woman named Eleanor Vance, raised an eyebrow. This isn't your standard agreement. No, I replied. It's the one that protects your assets and gets the deal signed tomorrow. The other one takes 6 weeks and a team of litigators. She read the first page, then looked up at me, a glimmer of admiration in her eyes. Perhaps your next negotiation should be for a seat on this side of the table. Sao Paulo, Frankfurt, Osloit was the same story. Skepticism about OmniCore, but a deep, established trust in me. I was answering questions before they were asked, rewriting contracts, and personally guaranteeing outcomes that the company I represented could no longer deliver. By the time I met with Ricardo Vargas in Brazil, he was blunt. Andrew, I trust you. I do not trust your CEO or his son. This deal lives or dies with you. If you leave, the deal is off. That's when I made my move. Ricardo, I said, my voice low. What if I told you there's a way to get the exact same technology, the same security, and the same leadership, but without the politics and the dead weight? Would that be a conversation you'd be willing to have? He didn't even blink. Andrew, that is the only conversation I am interested in having. 5 cities, 5 meetings, 5 seeds of rebellion quietly planted. I wasn't just closing a deal for OmniCore. I was opening the door for its successor. The cabin lights dimmed as we began our transatlantic crossing. I had the signed contracts from all 5 clients secured in my briefcase. A $3 billion triumph. It should have been the pinnacle of my career. I opened my company laptop to send the confirmation email to Harrison. The screen flickered. Access denied. I tried to log into the company's internal network. Invalid credentials. My corporate email, my calendar, my contacts, all of it, gone. Then the email from Harrison landed. The execution order. A single, cowardly paragraph firing me at 39.0 feet while I was bringing home the prize. For a long moment, I was paralyzed. The sheer audacity of it was breathtaking. They didn't even have the courage to face me. They fired me mid-flight, alone and cut off, after I had just secured the future of their company. The insult was more painful than the termination itself. They saw me as a tool, and now that the job was done, the tool was being discarded. They thought that by cutting my access, they were cutting me off at the knees. They believed that without my OmniCore email address, I had no power, no influence. They assumed I had no contingency plan. They were catastrophically wrong. Months earlier, citing cross-border data security protocols, I had initiated a full, legally approved backup of all Trident deal documentation onto a privately encrypted drive. I had everything, every contract draft, every financial model, every transcript of every call, every piece of leverage. They thought they had fired their top employee. What they had actually done was arm their most dangerous competitor. I calmly placed the dead OmniCore laptop back in its bag. For my briefcase, I retrieved my personal machine, the Apex laptop. It hummed to life, its screen displaying the clean, sharp logo of my new company. I opened the encrypted folder. It was all there. Secure, legal, mine. A surge of cold, hard resolve washed over me. Harrison hadn't fired me. He had unleashed me. They thought cutting me loose in the middle of the ocean would leave me adrift. They had no idea I had already built my own ship. I opened a new document, my fingers poised over the keyboard. I typed a single, simple instruction to my waiting team: execute. Then I closed the lid, leaned back in my seat, and for the first time in a year, I saw nothing but a clear sky ahead. The city felt different. As the taxi crawled through the mid-morning Manhattan traffic, the familiar skyline of steel and glass seemed alien, a place I no longer belonged to. It was 8:45 a.m. when I arrived at the OmniCore Tower. I stood on the sidewalk for a moment, looking up at the building where I had invested a decade of my life. It looked smaller, somehow. Inside the marble lobby, the security guard, A friendly guy named Sal, who always had a joke for me, suddenly looked uncomfortable. "Mr. Jensen?" he stammered. "I didn't say you were coming in." I held up my keycard. They didn't say I wasn't. I pressed it against the turnstile. A red light flashed. "Access denied." Sal winced. "Sorry, Andrew. They flagged your credentials this morning." I just nodded. It wasn't his fault. But standing there, locked out of a place I had helped build, I felt like a ghost haunting my own past. On my old floor, the atmosphere was frigid. The junior analysts I had mentored now stared intently at their screens, refusing to look up. My desk was gone, not just cleared off, physically removed. In its place was a sleek new workstation, a nameplate already on it. Leo Thorne, VP, Global Strategy. My plants were gone. The awards I had won for the company were gone. I had been completely erased. On a nearby table sat the new internal company newsletter. The headline screamed, "Leo Thorne steers OmniCore to historic 3-pert Trident victory." The article was a masterpiece of corporate fiction, praising Leo's visionary leadership and masterful negotiation. It mentioned my name once, in passing, following the departure of Andrew Jensen, who has left to pursue other opportunities. I dropped the newsletter in the trash and walked out without a word. I checked into a hotel suite overlooking the river. I closed the curtains, took off my shoes, and finally let the full weight of it settle. It wasn't grief. It was the chilling realization that my loyalty, my work, my very identity within that company had been nothing more than a temporary asset. They had used my talent, and now they had deleted me like a corrupted file. But as I sat there, the emptiness began to fill with something else. Freedom. I pulled out the Apex laptop. The secure client portal Marcus had built was flawless. I opened my contact list, the personal numbers for the 5 CEOs I had just spent 2 weeks with. I sent each of them an identical, 3-word email. "The door is open." The next morning, I sat in my hotel suite with a black coffee and watched the storm I had created gather on the horizon. I knew what was happening at OmniCore. Harrison Thorne would be swaggering into his Monday morning executive meeting, expecting a victory lap. But the victory calls weren't coming. Ethan, who still had sources inside their legal department, gave me the play-by-play. At 9:15 a.m., Harrison placed a call to Mr. Kenjiro in Tokyo. It went straight to voicemail. He tried Eleanor Vance in London. Her assistant informed him she was in an unscheduled off-site strategy session for the remainder of the week. By 11:00 a.m., a cold dread was beginning to permeate the 42nd floor. They called Ricardo Vargas in Sao Paulo. His assistant was polite but firm. "Mr. Vargas is unavailable." Harrison, losing his composure, demanded, "For how long?" There was a slight pause before she replied, "For OmniCore? Indefinitely." The line went dead. Back in my suite, I refreshed the Apex client dashboard. All 5 CEOs had logged into the secure portal I created. All 5 had scheduled exploratory video calls with me for that afternoon. There were no fireworks, no angry confrontations. Just a quiet, decisive shift of allegiance. OmniCore wasn't being attacked. It was being rendered irrelevant. For a corporation built on ego and noise, the silence was a death sentence. Around 1:00 p.m., Harrison made his last, desperate move. He had his PR team send out a press release announcing the finalization of the Trident deal and requested confirmation quotes from all 5 client companies. Only one replied. It was an unsigned, unformatted email sent to Harrison's personal account. It contained only 7 words. "OmniCore no longer represents our interests. Andrew does." I stared at that sentence. It was more valuable than any promotion, more powerful than any title. The company that had tried to silence me was now being deafened by the silence of the clients I had won. Later that evening, Ethan called. "They're in full-blown panic," he said, unable to hide the glee in his voice. "Harrison is screaming about sabotage, but they can't prove a thing. The clients have gone completely dark on them. They don't need to talk," I said calmly. "They've already made their statement. This wasn't revenge. It was a reckoning." At 9:00 a.m. sharp, the press release went live. It wasn't blasted across the wires. It was sent directly from the Apex Solutions media portal to a curated list of the most influential journalists and analysts in the tech world. The message was simple, elegant, and devastating. Apex Solutions is pleased to announce a landmark, $3 billion strategic partnership with Vogel Automotive, Kenjiro Electronics, Sterling Financial, Solara Energy, and Nordic Freight. The 7-year agreement will pioneer a new standard in secure, integrated global cloud infrastructure. For further inquiries, contact Apex Solutions. Andrew Jensen, CEO. No mention of OmniCore. No gloating. Just a clean, decisive statement of fact. By 10:30 a.m., the financial news networks were buzzing. The silent coup. Who is Apex Solutions and how did they poach OmniCore's landmark deal? Back at the OmniCore tower, the silence had shattered into pure chaos. Ethan texted me. Harrison has locked himself in his office. Leo is apparently crying in the boardroom. They're trying to draft a counterstatement claiming intellectual property theft. I didn't bother to reply. They hadn't been robbed. They had been outmaneuvered. The power you build in silence is the most potent, because your enemies don't see the foundation being laid. They only feel the ground collapse beneath them. By noon, the Financial Times was calling it the most audacious strategic play in a decade. My Apex inbox was flooded with over 100 emails from venture capitalists and potential partners. We ignored them all. The foundation had to be perfect before we built the walls. Meanwhile, the 5 client CEOs remained completely silent, their refusal to comment a more powerful indictment than any public statement could be. Marcus came by the hotel suite that afternoon with a bottle of champagne and a printed copy of the press release. Gonna frame this? He grinned. I might have it tattooed, I replied, a real smile finally breaking through. Later that evening, a voicemail appeared on my phone from an unsaved number. It was Harrison. His voice was hollow, stripped of all its arrogance. He didn't yell or threaten. He asked a single, pathetic question. Andrew, was this personal? I deleted the message before he finished. Of course it was personal. It was also business. It was strategic. And it was long overdue. Looking out at the city skyline that night, I no longer felt like a ghost. I felt like a king surveying his new kingdom. A kingdom built not with noise and fury, but with silence and precision. The Global Tech Summit in Munich was OmniCore's last stand. They had leaked news of a major new European partnership, a desperate attempt to signal to the market that they were still relevant after the Trident debacle. At 9:00 a.m., Harrison Thorne and his son Leo stood at the front of a private conference room, preparing to meet with the CEO of a rising Slovakian tech firm, a man named Victor Novak. I knew Victor. We had shared a bottle of bourbon in a Prague jazz club 2 years earlier, talking about the future of sovereign cloud data. I entered the room unannounced. Victor's eyes widened in recognition. Harrison Thorne turned, and the color drained from his face. He looked like he'd seen a ghost. Andrew, he hissed. This is a private meeting. No, Harrison, I said calmly, walking directly to the head of the table. This is a joint pitch. Apex Solutions was invited to present an alternative after your firm provided conflicting technical data. The summit organizers insisted on transparency. I laid out the Apex proposal. It was leaner, more secure, and perfectly tailored to Victor's needs because his CTO had already secretly approved the specs with my team a week ago. Victor looked at Harrison. We cannot afford a repeat of the Trident situation. That was a disaster. That was sabotage, Harrison blurted out, his composure cracking. I didn't even flinch. I looked directly at Victor. It wasn't sabotage. It was a choice. I offered them clarity over chaos. They chose clarity. Harrison turned to Victor, his voice pleading. You can't seriously consider partnering with a man who abandoned his own company. I let the silence hang in the air for a moment before I delivered the final blow. I don't abandon ships, Harrison, I said, my voice cold and steady. I rebuild them, without the men who drilled the holes in the first place. Victor looked at his legal team, then back at me. We will proceed with Apex Solutions' proposal. Harrison looked like he'd been physically struck. I could have left then, but I wasn't done. I came for the deal, but I also came for the dignity they stole from me. I looked Harrison dead in the eye. One condition, I said. I will oversee this integration personally. But I will not work with you, or your son. My team does not partner with saboteurs or incompetents. Victor nodded. That is acceptable. Harrison Thorne, the titan of industry, didn't say another word. He turned and walked out of the room, a defeated man, the game no longer his to play. At 7:45 the next morning, I walked into the new headquarters of Apex Solutions. The morning sun streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows. It was quiet, but it was the hum of potential, not the silence of fear. On the wall in the main lobby was a simple, brushed steel plaque. It read, Apex Solutions. Founded by Andrew Jensen. My name. Not buried in a memo. Not stolen for a slide deck. But etched in steel. I stepped into the boardroom. It wasn't the cold, intimidating space OmniCore favored, but a room built for collaboration. Ricardo, Eleanor, and the other client partners were there, working with my team, laughing, building. It wasn't a room of clients and vendors. It was a room of partners. That afternoon, a news alert pinged on my phone. Leo Thorne has resigned from OmniCore effective immediately. An hour later, another alert. Harrison Thorne removed from the board of directors by unanimous vote. There was no scandal, no public drama, just a quiet, surgical removal. They had tried to erase me with a silent email, and in the end, they were the ones who simply disappeared. When I signed the final, consolidated contract later that day, a multi-billion-dollar agreement that unified 5 global giants under a single architecture, I didn't think about the money or the headlines. I thought about my name, Andrew Jensen, and for the first time I was signing as myself. Not a tool, not a ghost, but a founder. If you have ever poured your soul into a project only to have your name stripped from it, if you have ever been told you're not the right fit for the success you earned, if you have ever been told to just let it go, then listen to me. Your value is not determined by those who are too blind to see it. Some victories are not won with shouting and anger. They are won with focus, with strategy, and with the quiet, relentless pursuit of what you are owed. And when your moment comes, your success will be the only statement you ever need to make.